most importantly, what is immediate that will affect the pocketbook and the outlook into next year so we can all get ready. Thank you for joining. I'm your host, David DuByne.
Right along here with Ransom Godwin every Thursday night, bringing you the latest. How does our world dovetail into cycles of time, overlaying those in the know, trying to distract those that don't know? How do we connect the dots? That's the question. Ransom's with me tonight. And are you living the dream? That's the title of the show. Are you living the dream? You know, they try to sell you this utopian thing. Work your whole life. You'll be retired at 65. You can sip cocktails on the beach and then... Well, you can't really do much because your body's old by then, right? Can't go climbing the Himalayas, just roaming free like you could in your 20s. So it's a little bit different. They try to sell you on something, and then it looks like suddenly it's being taken away. I was reading over on Zero Hedge a bit earlier today with, who was that, Martin Armstrong. Was looking at possible debt default with the U.S. As early as 2025, but he really thinks U.S., Europe, and Japan need some kind of war to default on the debt, and then they can blame it on Putin. They can blame it on China. China's out because they can't redeem. So reset the debt, you need a war. So that's all. You know, if all else fails, they take you to war. So what else is this? Record floods. I experienced such a crazy storm last night. There was like strobe lightning for about 3.5, almost 4 hours continuously. I'm talking 3 to 4 strikes per second. It was so blinding. I don't know, it's an energized sky. It rained about 3.5 inches in the evening. I'm just kind of exhausted from that. It was so loud the whole time, and, you know, trying to take a look at the birds we have and the dogs that were scared, and just the rumbling, and it just, the light. It's almost like you had to go into the dark bathroom and close the door or something and just not look at the light. It was mesmerizing to the point of being hypnotic. As a message from nature that something has just changed with the electrification of our skies. We want to discuss that a little bit tonight. But Ransom, thanks for joining. Been a busy week.
I ignored the whole week. I tried not to look. I mean, because, you know, every Thursday I feel like we predicted the next week. So I've been trying not to look at stuff. But I did an experiment because I dragged out some old equipment. I have an old projector, and I hooked it up to a antenna, put it up on my house, you know, to get out of the internet digital, you know, connection and see what the antenna TV people, you know, like people that just sit at home, which is most boomers actually, and anyone older than them if they're still alive, and a large chunk of poor people or people that don't have access to internet. They rely on antenna TV, and there's, you know, you have the main stations there, ABC, CBS, NBC, and the public broadcasting, and then you got a couple of entertainment channels. And what's ironic is you sent me that video. I only got a chance to watch about 4 minutes of it. And already I was just thinking, wow, that just parallels with my experience in the last couple of days watching antenna television. So I'm watching the news, and I'm watching, you know, some of the shows that they broadcast that they bought and they have licenses for, which is majority of it's really old entertainment, like I'm going to say 50s to early 90s. And that's basically what's on television. So the era of the United States, basically when it was doing good financially and all kinds of other things, they're showing all those shows. But then you flip over to the news, and man, the world is ending. Didn't you know that every one of these storms is part of the current climate crisis? And I heard this on every single channel, this phrase, the current climate crisis. So every time they reported on a flood, a fire, you know, tornadoes, you know, all of that stuff, they said that it was, you know, one part of the current climate crisis that's going on. So, you know, it's a really weird experience. So I'm watching that video you sent me, and I'm looking at it, and it's talking about, you know, some of the stuff in there between boomers and what happened afterwards. And we've actually talked a lot about that on this channel in different ways. But the parallels with the television, they're showing you the world post-revolution and the world pre-revolution, basically. And you can see that there's there was no replacement for the lifestyle that the U.S. was headed to having as a permanent lifestyle for all peoples that live here. And somebody just said, nope, and they turned it off. And we've been regressing as a civilized nation. We've been regressing as a financial powerhouse, a technological powerhouse. And we can get into, some weird things that they're saying. So the title kind of came off this article I saw that said from CNBC, just 4% of the current retirees say they're living the dream. And they have a whole little survey of why. And I have not read that, but I will go ahead and bet that it has something to do with the cost of living, the cost of medication, the cost of gasoline, et cetera, and some other reasons. But we can get into that. So yeah, I skipped the main news like that I'm used to, which is articles coming out of the various websites that kind of dominate the trending topics and stuff. From both sides of the aisle. I go all of the propaganda channels. I go to all the alternative media channels. I try to, see what's what and add it together on what's next because it's so bizarre. But when I flipped over to that antenna TV and I'm seeing what, millions of people are probably still seeing, it's a nonstop propaganda machine. They were even talking about ancient volcanoes. Which is very interesting. And I watched a program on the Cascadian subduction zone, or not the Cascadian, what is it called on the West Coast there?
The Cascadia Range.
Oh, okay, so that's right. So the subduction zone off there, and they were talking about, 700 years ago or more, they had a massive earthquake that just dropped the whole shelf, basically, that was above ground in this pristine forest that was, thousands and thousands of years old, and they just dropped it right down into salt water, and then a different part of the ocean out there raised up, creating a giant tsunami. And they were talking about, the cycle is pretty, regular for as earthquakes and things like that go. So every 250 years or so, they have one of these little burps or abrupt movements on the subduction zone there, and possibly a massive tsunami can result of that. And it's overdue for like 150 years or so. So that could happen at any time. And it's weird that I think the movie How It Ends, one of those Netflix, movies. They got there over there on the left coast, and there was some kind of electromagnetic disturbance out in the ocean and volcanic activity. They never really did explain it, but I had a feeling that that's what they were trying to say, kind of some predictive programming. And then, what do we got going on all of the channels here are talking about the tornadoes, right? And they're hammering that, the tornadoes. And then I watched the Mexican TV, because I live right here by the border, so I get to watch both countries' television. And I'm looking at them, and they're showing all of the flooding in Brazil and the fires in Guatemala, and all of these other destabilizing things that are happening in Latin America. And so I get to see that they are pumping the fear 24 hours a day, trying to convince people that things that are happening have never happened before to humans, and it's the result of humans, and that it is an ongoing crisis that you need to spend all of your attention and your worry and, keep your mind focused on their emergency that they have going on. It's so fake. It's, there is a lot of tornadoes this year. I think there's over 300 already, and there is a lot of devastation, which begs the question, instead of trying to blame humans for the weather, why aren't we talking about why they still build homes in the exact same way as they have for a long time, knowing that in certain portions of the landscape, the geography and the topographical form of areas, that the weather is going to come in there and drop these, killer storms on people, finger of God in the middle of the night, ripping apart neighborhoods. And yet there's simple solutions and they don't use them anymore. And people used to have, everyone I knew when I was a kid, all of the older people that still owned houses, all of them, the great generation, the silent generation, all the people that were still alive out of those, they had storm cellars. And in the storm cellar, they had canned food and jarred food and emergency gear and all of that stuff. It was just like, yeah, whatever. We just, that's part of being a good citizen and a smart person. You just have all that stuff. And we've harped on it for years about, do you have a flashlight? Do you have a way to find out what's going on if your neighborhood gets flattened in the middle of the night, or a hurricane rolls in, or an earthquake, or, God forbid, something like the subduction zone scenario, which would probably put out Seattle and Portland as major devastation zones. And, we keep seeing it over and over again in the Middle East, in South America, in China, these massive earthquakes that tear up stuff in Japan. And yet the majority of the population does not plan or, change their lifestyle one single bit. And now we're going to have the added layer of destabilized government and food production and delivery services, I guess it would be the right way. So whenever these things start to come to a head, because nobody seemingly is really planning for them, you would think that all through Tornado Alley people would live in dome houses with a storm cellar. I mean, just as a standard architecture rule, so that they wouldn't be devastated every couple years when a storm rolls through and drops a tornado down. But yeah, it's just mind-numbing, the amount of propaganda that they have to try to convince humans that these things are all new and they're all because of you, and that they're not on a cycle, and that they haven't in the past happened, but at the same time run, programs blaming us for carbon dioxide while they're talking about things that happened 700 years ago. It's just bizarre how they try to mix myth and fact together to give a narrative to people that don't understand long-term cycles, or maybe just don't really understand recent history, altogether. But yeah, there's some really trippy stories that we can get into in a minute. They're trying to make food allergies go away. And another phenomenon I kind of noticed today when I got back on is from medical procedures to I guess medicines you take intravenously. I'm still self-censoring, but I think everybody knows what I'm talking about. All the way to processed foods, they're now admitting that there's health problems associated with these things. Matter of fact, I found 7 articles with the title basically saying ultra-processed foods are harming our health. Here's what you need to eat. Here's another one: high levels of ultra-processed foods linked with early death. Not like, people like you and I haven't probably been telling people that for decades. I imagine that the sources of their nutrition are questionable at best.
I don't even know if you'd call it nutrition. Seems like there's a lot of lack in nutrients in the soils of just chemical fertilizers. Who was I talking to? Oh, I was talking to Marjorie Wildcraft, and she was telling me that a carrot that you would buy from a supermarket that was grown in like California and a regular farm agrobiz there has 15 times less minerals and nutrients than a naturally grown one in her grandmother's time. I thought that was interesting in the overlay of nutrients there on what could or couldn't be. Now, you were talking about some silliness with everything being blamed on the climate. So I was listening to Ryan Hall, y'all, because he was following the tornadoes, and we got smashed by some storms yesterday, and we found out definitely where a lot of stuff leaks, like what the roofs we built on some different animal hutches and things leaking. So the 2024 hurricane season forecast names storms. This comes out of, I guess, a conglomeration from weather agencies across the United States, NASA, NOAA, European Space Agency, just anything in the Atlantic. 23 named storms. Again, you get that number 23, a lot of sacredism there. And then we get hurricanes 11. Cat 3 plus 5. Now that's almost double the other averages for all the years. So you look at that, go, all right, man, who's fishy? Who's being fishy with the numbers? Because I want to explain, go through here. Why is everything getting mixed up? Well, if you jump over to Severe Weather EU, which is a website, and they do long-term forecasting. So we're going to go from a shift from extreme El Nino to extreme La Nina, like at the top of the charts on both of them in just a matter of 4 months. Like our climate would not have enough time to stabilize and change during that swift transition. That's going to be one of the fastest and one of the most abrupt temperature switches ever recorded. And this goes back to the 1850s. You know, they used to drag thermometers behind the ships and whatnot. They're looking for like vortices and like cyclonic storms through the Arctic during this time as well. That'll spin further south. So I'm gonna fill you in right here. The northern hemisphere in the next few months is going to be an extreme transition period. It's going to it'll leave their mark on the atmosphere and weather patterns. All right, so when you're looking at this flip and everything being blamed on global warming suddenly, it's this, it's that. How can you possibly say every single set of storms is blamed on something? So as we swing through, probably around June, we're going to hit that threshold where we go back to near zero. So June, late June somewhere. And from there, it's just going to head straight down, continuously cooling through September, October, November, and it should bottom right around January of 2025. So we were predicting grand solar minimum winter type temperatures anyway, and now the La Nina is going to be crushing cold at that point, and all that moisture from the Hungatonga eruption coming out in the form of snow. So think about this in the weather that they can run with, although it'll be in the inverse on the cold side. So this goes back, and I'm talking about specifically better measured El Ninos, La Ninas from 1950 on this one chart I'm looking at here. And they just simply tell you it's a long-range forecast, and it's on repeating cycles of ocean heating and ocean cooling. It's been like that time immemorial, and it's enough to bend the planet's weather and change it to storm-like conditions, conditions shifting the intertropical convergence zone. There's a huge amount of cloud cell shifts as this does its clockwork back and forth, but they'll never admit to this natural variability. And this is a main driver. The Pacific Ocean temperatures are a main driver of our global weather systems. People bet on this on the markets. You know, if you're an ag trader, you know La Nina and El Nino neutral. And so what it's going to mean for crop production. Oh, they've been doing this since the 1920s. People bet on this on the futures market. They know exactly how the weather will be affected. And the climate is another term. For months and months and months on end. And then, you know, if they know it's going to be a drought usually, or if it's going to be extremely wet usually, or neutrals usually send different areas of the United States into different zones of wet or dry, but La Nina or El Nino just generally more the whole continent. So if you know it's going to be neutral, then you know in the southeast U.S., then it's going to get wetter down here. But just here, the way it flows and the way it meets the Gulf moisture, it just targets and just right over, you know, say Tennessee, down there, North Carolina, Georgia, South Carolina, extremely wet during these neutral ensos. All right, so that's a well-known thing for 100 years plus, that this shifts the global weather and it affects crop production. Yet we won't even look at it and give it the time of day because it's only you, it's only your CO2. Couldn't be the sun heating or cooling the Pacific now, could it? But this is going to be a rapid decline, quote unquote, rapid decline. And, you know, the thing they go into is long-term back in the past. So they're trying to match up the 1980 June to August drop-off in sea level pressure during that switch from an extreme of a El Nino into a La Nina. So they believe the closest we could get like 1980 June to August. And they see pretty much the same. Although there were some other matches in 1954, 1964, and 1973. So when they're looking at these long-term charts, they're just kind of going back in time and looking for the same repeating patterns that look similar with pressure variances and the quickness that the temperatures are going to drop off. And they're going to go straight from El Nino, boom, straight into La Nina, incredibly fast. So you have four reference years that you could compare to. So then all they would do is look back again and go, oh, okay. California, West, Oregon, Washington, extremely cold and rainy. Like if it's a 0 as the chart, it's a -20 in terms of like the temperature gradient going down. But places like the Midwest, right under Lake Michigan there, Ohio, Indiana, above, they're going to be above normal temperatures, a little bit drier. So you're going to get this flip-flop depending on where it is. And Europe is absolutely going to get hammered with Arctic temperatures the whole time, Central Europe. And lo and behold, there's a warm spot right below Iceland and Greenland. Would you imagine that? Oh, it's record heat in Iceland. It's record heat in Greenland. Oh, wait, that's the same spot I saw, not the wet spot. but the geopotential height anomaly pressure spot. And then you can just do your own research, and then summer 2024 long range forecast. They don't really throw in the hurricanes like everybody else is trying to attribute, but they're looking at an above amount of rainfall all through the Midwest grow belt. So, and above normal temperatures, you can see what this leads to. So, the reason I'm telling you this is they're trying to forecast hurricanes based on some fictitious global warming thing. The oceans change temperature all the time. I mean, this is what the El Niños and La Niñas are about, the pressure and the temperature of the water. Yet somehow that entire driver, a huge driver, that increases crop yield, decreases crop yield, creates droughts, creates floods, on a known cycle and mechanism for that, is somehow discounted. And every time it goes super hot on the El Nino, it raises global temperatures. Now watch this. If you go to Dr. Roy Spencer and you look at the lower tropospheric temperatures, yeah, it was up. But this is one of the hottest La Niñas or El Niños we've ever had, excuse me. And then the global temperatures were up. Now watch when it swings low and we come into December, January, extreme global low temperatures. Will that be blamed this time, Ransom? What do you think? Do you think they'll blame the global warming on the cooling that's occurring? I've already heard that excuse many a time, that the heating causes extreme cold. So now they got both, sides of the book cover. Heating and cooling right down the spine. Global warming, climate extremes. Wait, man-made. Hold on a second. They rebrand it all the time. You know what? If you pay your global tax, Ransom, I guarantee they can fix the weather and it'll go right back to the way it was when we were kids. The sun will be yellow again and the puffy skies. There'll be no more persistent contrails. If we just give them the tax money, all the skies will clear up again. Sounds like a utopia from the boomers, doesn't it?
You mean I can have a perfect world and I just have to pay a fee every month, a monthly subscription to clean air and a better life? No, that's they do that every time. The last couple of years when any place had record rainfall, like they're still trying to say, like, they'll say there's a drought in California for years. And then when it rains and the drought's over, they'll say this flooding from the global warming, the climate crisis is so severe. They do that with every story on there. It's every single one. And just last year, I remember some shenanigans from my own state where the Forestry Service lit a fire, a supposedly controlled burn, and now it's supposed to be the worst wildfire in our state's history. Wildfire, they say, and it was because of climate change. I'm wondering how long, the severe weather and all of that stuff that's not any more or less severe than other points in time is going to lead to the people that are in charge of things deciding exactly where people live. So I came across this article, and we've been kind of talking about these smart eco cities, the 15-minute cities, the whole idea behind that. And then simultaneously them running, rewilding projects, reforestation and stuff like that. And all of that sounds like a great idea until you realize that what they're doing is setting out sections of land that will no longer include the human being. Here's one from the BBC. Saudi forces told to kill to clear land for their ecocity. Excuse me. Saudi authorities have permitted the use of lethal force to clear land for the futuristic desert city being built by dozens of Western companies, an ex-intelligence officer has told the BBC. And that goes hand in hand with this article right here. Netanyahu unveils his utopian plan for Gaza 2035, and it shows a nice city with a bunch of skyscrapers and farms, and it's really lush and green there, unlike the area is today. So maybe their future plans have something to do with the weather changing, and that's something that we've kind of insinuated before, that these think tanks and planners, they plan for the long haul. They keep you distracted with the mindless nonsense, the fear-based programs and entertainment-based programs to steer your emotions and your intellect in a different direction or in a set view of the world. And then, it's easy for them every time an emergency happens, like this apocalyptic flood in Brazil. to just show that nonstop on TV, and people are thinking, oh my God, it's the end of the world. But it's not. These places flood all the time. Right away, my mind thinks Brazil. Isn't that where the Amazon is? Isn't that where one of the biggest rivers in the world and rainforest is? Where else would, a bunch of water likely dump? Silly me though. This whole concept is kind of the boomer thing, right? It's blame everything on humans, and then just I only got 4 minutes in the program you sent me, and I had already kind of established that yes, that's what we talk about a lot, that a generation of people built something and then their children tore it down. They tore it down because of whatever, various different reasons. But now that everything is completely gone, there's no replacement system they have to offer other than the utopian merger of corporate and state. And I don't want to go that route. Neither does a lot of other people. But it looks like that's what they're going to give us. And at the same time, they're going to blame us for our greed as they, forced us to basically eat a bunch of unhealthy things. It's that time where I'm pretty sure they're about to point the finger at you for every problem that's about to happen. And this is where it really gets weird to me. So I know that most of our audience realizes that people that are around today are probably not going to be around in the next couple of years because of different and various programs going on. I'll just put it this way. But here's a headline from Microsoft, or actually it's from the Wall Street Journal. Hospitals are refusing to do surgeries unless you pay in full. So, if you have something you need to do, they want it up front. And then here's another one to fry your noodle. Neuralink's first brain chip implant is having a bunch of problems. Now, who would have guessed that? So there's going to be an option to skip past this kind of archaic chip with wires and go ahead and start talking about programmable biochips. And we've been talking about that before. And here's another one I thought relates to last week. A study indicates if you could find out if a woman is a psychopath. Now that sounds interesting on it, just kind of as a thing to read. But when you get into it, you realize that how they discovered this is by algorithms and AI, which is exactly what I've been talking about. The system is now made to totally watch you and control you into the point where you won't even know that you're being led down a road that has no end, if you get what I'm saying. And that is, I'm not a doomsday. I don't think that the world's ending. I do realize that there are patterns, and one of those patterns is of genocide by government, or democide is actually the right word, democide. And it could be through, brute force and violence, or just over-regulation into the point of collapse.
Yeah, I have something with you. You brought an idea to me when you were talking about Saudi Arabia there. I have an answer for you. It's called the Indian Ocean Dipole. And, staying on the same vein with the El Nino, I had both the windows pulled up because the Indian Dipole is acting strangely too. But the pressure difference between Indonesia and what you consider Oman, Yemen, and the Arabian Peninsula, that weather driver there of the ocean temperatures also changes the trade wind flows. And as far as I know, this is a multi-thousand-year change is occurring with the West African monsoon, the way it also directs moisture. But right now, the Indian Dipole, or the Indian Ocean Dipole, IOD, not so much talked about. That's the pressure difference between east and west. Like you talk, Indonesia on the east side, and then west would be Western Africa, that Arabian Peninsula right there. It's the strongest it's been in 25 years. So again, it's positive phase. So what that means is you're getting much, much cooler over in like Indonesia, Northern Australia, cooler than normal. And then you'll get warmer than normal and way, way, way wetter than normal over that Arabian Peninsula area. Looks like Somaliland or Somalia, all the way down through Kenya, Tanzania, that whole area, all the way up to Egypt, and parts of, what you consider the Middle East right there with Saudi Arabia. increased convection, increased storms. So you got to wonder now, we got these two overlapping phases here. We got the West African monsoon, and a lot of peer-reviewed research coming out saying it's begun to shift. Now the debate is it a 2,000-year shift, a 4,000-year, or a 6,000-year shift? Because you look at the same area in the Sahel and Middle East, North Africa. 6,000 years ago, we got mega lakes there that rival anything of the Great Lakes in America, even larger, much larger, and vast river systems and vast, what you consider like swampland, estuaries, deltas, these sort of things going on. Massive amounts of habitation, huge amounts of population we're living there that is not given credit for, and the archaeological ruins absolutely show that in that time of increased vegetation and water supplies, etc., that area of North Africa and the Sahel was absolutely filled with people. And it seems rather advanced people, according to what they're unearthing in terms of archaeology and size of some of these areas. Eye of Africa, everybody's focused on that. David Stig Hansen, I did an interview with. But they were finding all these other things outside the Rakat structure there. They were going with LiDAR and pinging on all these other massive cities and these canals that were very similar to what you'd see the Okavango Delta and the Kalahari canals were also found in Mali. And, there's just a lot of similarities of some ancient technological past where maybe the version of history we're given isn't really the true facts, because 6,000 years ago when that place was wet and the West African monsoon was at its full maximum of precipitation potential, that place was very different than today. It's switched and it's gone all the way as far as it can to the north, pushing, and it's starting to swing back. So they're getting a lot more rain in these same areas. So they know that big cycle, that giant 2,000, 4,000, or 6,000 year cycle has repeated and is in a repeat pattern, becoming wetter. Now we got the Indian Ocean dipole pushing a huge amount of rain over there. Now they're cloud seeding on this. So it wasn't that they were just cloud seeding. They were cloud seeding into this increased precipitation, increased convection phase, because the Indian Ocean dipole is in a positive phase. In the cool water that's off Indonesia is way over under India now, under Sri Lanka. Now, it's very rare that the blue that you'll see with the cooler ocean temperatures, like 1 to 2 degrees Celsius below normal, would go that far off of Java and Sumatra, mainly Sumatra Island heading off west. But these are natural things also that all across the monsoon in Asia is affected by this. And somehow this doesn't make it into the models either, and they're not discussed about natural variability and this and Indian Ocean dipole and El Nino, and what if these are both going off at the same time? You got two major drivers of two different major oceans. Yet it's all you driving your SUV, Ransom. You got to stop that. I'm going to make you walk. I'm not even going to let you have rubber shoes, bro. You got to get used to walking barefoot and getting blisters and stuff, because I got to knock your carbon usage down to caveman again, or else I'm not going to let you stay on the planet. So giddy up.
I'm noticing, I'm looking at these cities that they have planned, and they couldn't be more obvious about that. They're just building giant walls and zones for people to not be in if you're not the right person. Let me show the listeners this. It's a think tank project for what Israel's going to look like.
Is that a fish tank or a think tank?
Maybe both. But they show little, resort umbrellas and stuff all through Gaza. So they have plans for the whole thing, and they have these intersecting maps that kind of show where they're going to be building walls and cutting people off. You look at this other one, that's the one in Saudi Arabia, and that's exactly what it is. It's a big, long, 170-kilometer line in the earth that's an elite city for people that are on the system, the people that need jobs and want to take part in the new reset and be part of that electronic system. But what it does is it cuts off 170 kilometers of north and south from each other. And they seem to really be planning that this whole area is going to be a luscious forest, or for resorting and living the good life. And it strikes me funny that these are the same places and same areas of the ancient world that all of human history just about took place in, as far as wars and giant cities and their collapses repeatedly. This is the area. And it's like, they haven't learned anything from history. And it makes me think, how long is the era that they're planning on moving it? I mean, because it is pretty obvious at this point that you could say there's enough evidence that they're trying to remove the people from the equatorial zones and squeeze them all into the northern hemisphere as far as they could get them, and redesign and completely make over that equatorial zone as a new world, basically. I mean, it is the area of the ancient world. I mean, even in the Americas, all the way over to Africa, the Middle East, that whole stretch that goes around the world, which should probably include the bottom of India and Southeast Asia and some of these really old places that haven't been lived in a really long time, as far as super high tech, like with the stones and high high tech cities that were kind of buried in the jungle, especially in Southeast Asia, like Angkor Wat and other places. And it looks like the modern companies or powers that be are planning their new cities, their new Babylons, and their new, the whole thing right in that area. And they're showing you what they want to do, and the times on these are really close to now. It's not like 50 or 100 years in the future. They're talking about 2035, 2030. These times that they've been rubbing in everyone's face with their agendas are now coming up, and it is a weird time to live in to see where they're going with it. And it looks like a very negative direction as far as the overall population. But maybe they're those, people that think that doing bad for the greater good is actually, a benevolent thing for the species. The people that have the right to rule, and also the new upcoming elites in the technocratic fields feel like they are the smartest people on the planet, and therefore they have the right to make the decisions for everyone. And it's looking like a sci-fi movie, and it's increasing. Um, I think the way that they're going to sell this new technological revolution on the people is by repeatedly showing them how humans have messed it up, how humans can't regulate it, how humans are violent, they're racist, all of these other terms that they're throwing on the average nuclear family and average worker, because that's what it is. And it's so funny that revolution after revolution claims to be for the worker, but the worker class, the middle class, is always the ones that end up being reduced in number, wealth, property, and freedom altogether. I mean, that's always the plan. That's always what happens. So it makes you wonder, what are all of these students that are in these universities learning? What is it that they've learned? Well, we know, because I've looked into it, it's a lot of, replacement doctrine. Get rid of the old. Here's this new thing. Blame everything on the old. And it's the same thing as that video. I don't even know what the name of that video you sent was, but it's the same concept. Get rid of the old, smash it. Let's have a revolution. Let's change it. But we don't have anything to replace it with. But that's okay. The financiers and the think tankers, or the fish tankers, whatever you want to call them, they do know what they want to replace it with. And they're rubbing it in our faces, and they're making plans. And you can follow the money. The money is going to show you exactly what's happening. And I think you've made a good case over the years that not only with the water infrastructure, but farming infrastructure. And you could clearly see militarily the world has a grip on that entire equatorial belt. There's something going on, and all of the traditional colonial powers all have their hand in it, but seemingly are, burning down their own nations because they don't care. It's like the sinking ship thing, where the rats just jump over to something else that's floating. But in this case, they already have a boat waiting for them, but they didn't bring any life rafts for the public.
Did they bring any windmills or wind turbines where they're cutting down 120,000 hectares in Germany? Did they bring windmills on them with the boats so they can have free power? Isn't that the utopia they promised? Free power for everybody. Once you install your solar panels, you never have to ever buy electricity again. Oh, you get an electric car, you'll never have to pay for fuel again. Routinely lied to. How many times do they need to lie to us once again of this bait and switch before people are like, wait a minute. Carbon capture, underground storage pipelines directly from the ethanol plant. Oh, the dream to save our planet. Railroaded through eminent domain with corrupt officials in small towns. Hey, wait, you're going to take that over my farmland? Wait a minute. I'm not going to get any revenue from it either. Just going to push it through on a private company telling you got to go straight through my farm. Really? Oh, thanks for that. What's going to save the planet? It's underground sequestration. Okay. Well, I got one off the Daily Skeptic here because, you know, this terraforming that continues on our planet, this terraforming is not for us. It is for that species that is coming or is here that will emerge. So they keep talking to you blue in the face. You're going to global warming. There's too much CO2. Well, trees are one of the best things. We all planted trees. If we planted billions and billions of trees, and if we started shellfish farms across every shoreline, even if we weren't going to eat the shellfish, just to have the shellfish sequester the carbon, because, you know, calcium carbonate is a seashell. So if you want to sequester carbon, you could do it with all those super expensive things and squeeze it into a gas and then put it underground. Or you could have another animal use that same carbon through the oceans and create seashells, which is like thousands of times denser than a gas, and pull the carbon from that. And as the carbon is removed out of the ocean, the carbon will absorb, or the ocean will absorb more carbon dioxide. Nobody ever talks about seashell farming to solve some of these problems. Well, that would be almost free food then, wouldn't it? High protein free foods. Can't have that, you know, instead of, and then just going off and planting trees would be a great one. But here, this is the Daily Skeptic here. I'd come across this and I couldn't believe it, shaking my head like that's impossible, because they're telling us save the forest, save the land, we're going to rewild it, we're going to do this. Because Ransom and I had talked about rewilding projects in Europe until we're almost blue in the face about removing all the dams. They can't have any dams up because you got to have the newt and the freshwater minnow going back up the stream, yet they cut off thousands of megawatts by all these little dams that they've destroyed, and all that, you know, all the waterworks and irrigation projects for the farmers. They used to rely on that. Even if it wasn't hydroelectric, it was for irrigation for farms. And nope, now they got to pay premium for pumping, and then they get all these extra taxes when they used to have free water coming down the mountain. So anywhere you had something free, they ruined it. They destroyed it so you get back on the system. Well, this one just blows my mind here. Germany begins felling 120,000 trees from fairy tale forests to make way for wind turbines. So I thought, all right, well, this is a kind of a weird one. There's a German fairy tale forest. It's called Reinhardtswald. 1,000-year-old ancient forest, ancient woods itself. And guess what? They're in there cutting that down to put up giant wind turbines. This one area where it's right next to Sleeping Beauty Castle, for those familiar with the fairy tales. They're going to put up 18 giant wind turbines around the Sabababerg, the Sleeping Beauty Castle, like I say, the fairy tales. And I look at this and say, no way. They're in a 200 square kilometer area, 200 square. So you multiply by 0.6, let's say 12, 120 square miles. And they're cutting down select chunks of old growth forest to put in these windmills across different areas in Germany, in this area that's known as it's a rewilded nature zone area called the fairy tale forest. And I'm looking at this saying, wait a second. So Pierre Gosselin from No Trick Zone has been covering this. I mean, a huge amount of Germans are super upset, and they're trying to sell it back to him like, oh, there's going to be no cost. Anybody that's around this forest is going to get free power from these wind turbines. And they're like, what? How's that even possible? You're destroying the ecology of it. Got dead birds, turbine vibration sickness, animals leaving and fleeing the area due to this, I guess they call it like strobe dizziness when they get the vibration from the animals. Different magnetic fields in the area that are tweaking the animals also. And somehow that's allowed. Yet they turn the cheek and, tell you can't drive a car or eat meat. Yet they're allowed to cut down an entire forest to put up wind turbines through some backhanded, greasy deal of a brother's friend knows some other, executive at the company, and it's a kickback thing. And, where did all the trees go? Where did all the wildlife go? And now they want to close down a farm to put the same wildlife back that they just destroyed, putting up the wind turbine farm in a 1,000-year-old growth forest. Like, I shook my head at this, and some of it's just insane. How they're trying to tell you one thing about the ecosystem, one thing about the climate, yet they're destroying the very thing that they're promoting to save it, and they're just shifting that of this movement of money. It's a wealth transfer. That's all it is. Anybody who's existing free off the system, they're finding out where they are and they're targeting those resources. And like this, you cut down, all right, 120,000 trees at the first fell to put down these wind turbines. 120,000 fully grown trees are being cut down to make way for the wind turbine. Well, Ransom and I have been talking about, they're trying to confiscate your farms up to even 5 acres and do what with them? Replant forest and rewild it. Now you're telling me that this makes sense here? Well, how many trees average on a density could you put on a 5-acre farm? And they want to take thousands of 5-acre farms off any kind of production, remove the cattle and the people off of those farms, and then rewild it and make it back into an ecological nature zone, no humans allowed. So you got to balance that. This is about the same amount of trees, 120,000 trees. And look at this. Are they just transferring this everywhere? Like, for me, I really can't, as a common sense thinker, I can't understand it. I truly can't understand it. As a rational thinking human being, and the knowledge that Ransom and I share about these rewilding projects, how they could absolutely do this and get away with it. And at the same time, I mean, this is the type of information that needs to be shared with those in Europe so they can know these projects are going on. This is why there's so much stifling and censorship, because by sharing these types of stories, like, hey, in Germany, they're cutting hundreds of thousands of trees down, clear-cutting forests to put wind turbines, yet they're confiscating your farms in the Netherlands. Y'all need to have a conversation, like, what's going on here? Because for me as a rational human, that's the only thing I can say is just the utmost corruption, and it's terraforming, nothing else. That's the only way I can look. Sounds insane. But think about if you're terraforming for a different magnetic field species to come and inhabit this with a slightly different atmosphere, and a lot more things make sense. Now, we're these inhabitants here with us all the time underground, where you got to think about if you're breathing, there might be higher CO2 concentrations underground or lower, depending on where they are. This hollow earth thing suddenly starts to make a lot more sense. Like, it's almost as if somebody's waiting down there just to open the gates and come charging across and swarming across the earth. Because everything I see about this story and this rewilding thing is something stinks to high heaven. And Ransom, I'll read you the title again here. This costs off Daily Skeptic. Germany begins felling 120,000 trees from fairy tale forest to make way for wind turbines. I can't make heads or tails. Maybe you can.
We need power generation to stay green, man, and we have to do it in the most toxic ways possible. That's the only way that makes sense, is to cut down. If we cut down the forest, we could save it, because then man can't destroy it if it's not there. Because we only have 4 more years to eat the babies, or we're all going to die anyway. I mean, these people are nuts. They making up stuff all the time. When I first saw that Bill Gates thing about chopping down forest to help the environment, when obviously these guys are screaming all the time about CO2 sequestering CO2, right? And I did a couple of formulas and found out here in the U.S., just in the U.S., I'm sure you would find the same thing in other countries, but in the U.S., the trees sequester more CO2 than the American people produce. And I went further and did North America and found out the ratio is really close to the same thing. We might produce just a tiny amount more in North America than the forests sequester, and that's only one form of sequestering CO2. So if you're supposed to be sequestering CO2, how is chopping down forests going to do that? Well, obviously there's something phony about that, and it's on your face. It's like this article I found right here to close it out, how crazy things are. Here's a mainstream article talking about medical freedom versus public health. Should fluoride be added into our drinking water? And it goes through a lot of arguments about how dentists like it and people like it, or they want the choice. But nowhere in the article do they mention the argument on why people don't want it in their water. They show other arguments that have nothing to do with World War II, which, if you know about World War II, then you know about fluoride in the water and what it does to people. And that's an argument they're not going to have. So they completely are the gatekeepers of all arguments, even online. And all of these people go to Wikipedia and things like that, thinking naively that they're going to be putting facts there, when in fact it's all distorted information. And you almost have to have a library that's pre-2020, or not even 2020, like more like pre-2000. To get correct definitions and the way people thought about things all the way up until about, I'm going to say 2010, when they really ramped up this transformation of civilization. And this is just like one of those things. They always have the arguments out there in the mainstream, recently anyway, about the topics that we talk about, but they never inject the side of the argument that we're actually talking about. None of the actual things that one might be worried about. And here's this article's from NBC News called Medical Freedom versus Public Health. Should fluoride be in the drinking water? So you can look that up and read it. And there's some arguments for and against, but none of them get into the kind of things that we would be worried about, like, is processed foods bad? Okay, but why? Why are they bad? Why are they the majority of foods available? Why are they telling you on TV that a bowl of Frosted Flakes is a good dinner? I don't know the questions to these, but I know that I'm not listening to them. I listen to them only to a point. And you can get into almost everything from banking to medicine, and really look at the supposed specialists and people that know what they're talking about, and then look at their track record. Let's just use medicine for an example. If you were to believe everything they said for the past few years, you might be one of these people that they're thinking about when they want you to pay your full bill at the hospital before they do anything, because there's risk involved with surgeries, and seemingly those risks may be going up. I don't know. What do you think?
I never heard of that before. They make you pay before any procedures. That's like paying at the restaurant before you eat.
Yeah.
I mean, it might be like that when there's food shortages. They already got facial recognition cameras all over the place in the UK, starting in the supermarkets, because there's so much theft. I mean, is that the way it's going to be? There's going to be a lot of dine and dashers. That'll be the biggest rage now. Dine and dash, and then flash mobs and dine and dashers, and you need to pay for everything in advance. And Ransom, I wanted to tell you something since we were on the last show together. I live in a little small town. It's about 1,000 people. And then there's another smaller town, or a little bit bigger town, excuse me. And there's probably about 4,000 people over there. It's got a tiny little Walmart inside there. So like you go to some cities and you just got mega Walmart things. There's a little one where you can come in and we needed to pick up a garden hose sprayer, and I didn't have one. So it was just like, until I could get up to the co-op and go get a proper one, we needed it we're doing hay bale gardening this year, so I had to put the fertilizer in and get all the thing wetted down so we can get the hay bales starting to like prime them up and cook them and get the fertilizer in the hay bale. But anyway, I go there and there's 50 pickup spots now, 50. Where you order online and then you go into the parking lot and they deliver it out to you and you pick it up and they go. Now, even at the height of COVID, there was only 22 of them there. At the height of COVID, 22. Now, they just put in 50, all brand new. And so they moved it what was in the center of the parking lot, right near the stores. You can easily walk out over onto the side, and 50 places now. And I talked to a couple of guys. I was like, why'd you get 50? He's like, well, there's a lot more online shopping. And I said, well, not that much, really, man. You guys you're burning up the parking spaces out here for all these dedicated, pull in and we'll bring it out to your car kind of thing. And you were the one I know told me that this seemed to be a new fad, that they were going to be closing a lot of stores off like Target's doing, putting everything behind glass. You have to pre-order it, and then they bring it out to you. Now, I'm seeing this with my own two eyes here. And before, I'd heard the stories, hadn't seen much until I saw it myself. And then I'm like, oh, no. Even in this little tiniest of town, which you consider East Tennessee, a place where you wouldn't need to put everything under plastic and you wouldn't need to lock up the store and have everybody order it unless it's really going to be that type of event.
This is Mysteries in the Histories. A mysterious manuscript, roughly 250-page book written in an entirely unknown language and writing system. It's been carbon dated back to the 1400s and includes illustrations of plants that don't resemble any known species, believed to have been intended as a medical text. It's named for the Polish book dealer who purchased it in 1912. This is the mystery of the Voynich manuscript. Since its discovery in 1912, the 15th century Voynich manuscript has been a strange, mysterious cult phenomenon captivating the minds of many. Its first confirmed owner was Georg Barisch from 1585 to 1662, an alchemist from Prague who discovered it in his library. Barisch tried to investigate the manuscript's origins to no avail. The manuscript, full of handwriting in an unknown language, zodiac symbols, naked women and strange objects like unknown plants, seemed to be from another time, or even another world. For centuries, this book repeatedly changed hands. When it was purchased by Voynich, who posited that it was authored by Albertus Magnus, an alchemist, or Roger Bacon, an early scientist. People believed that Voynich himself fabricated the manuscript, although that theory wouldn't explain the carbon dating of the paper and ink to the 15th century. The book itself bears no indication of its authors, about 6 inches by 9 inches and around 232 pages decorated, not unlike others in the illuminated age. Wrapped in vellum, with vellum pages, the manuscript features 116 folded folios bound in 18 bundles. The binding of the book is old and busted, though it is not original to the text. Many of the pages are fold-outs, some are missing. Inside the tome are innumerable lines of looping text, inked in iron gall in a medium typical of the Middle Ages, scribbled in a strange, unfamiliar language and a strange, unfamiliar script, incomprehensible, causing Voynich to conclude that the tome was written in code. Alongside the text, unknown if important or decorative, there is an abundance of illustrations and pictorial art. Composed of inks and pigments in tones and color palettes common to the 1400s, these illustrations seem to split the manuscript into 4 separate sections, including sections about botany, astronomy and astrology, balneology, the science of the therapeutic use of baths, and pharmacology, as well as a 5th and final section, with blocks of text separated by stars. The first and largest section of the manuscript is the botany section that contains detailed drawings of plants as if from another world or a lost continent, plants no one can identify and no one has ever seen before. The astronomy and astrology section has illustrations of the stars, the sun and the moon alongside several zodiac signs. Immersed in strange, shared baths, female figures frolic through the pages of the text's balneological section, while the pharmaceutical section is filled with what appears to be medicinal plants, indicated by the inclusion of medicinal bottles throughout this fantastical illustration. Like Voynich, many modern scholars suspect that the manuscript's text is a ciphered form of a familiar language, with their theories of the tome's latent linguistics flitting from Latin to Nahuatl, the language of the Aztecs and Toltecs of Mexico. Others say that the text is an artificial language or strange shorthand, and others still see the text as meaningless scribbles. The theories of the tome are, thus, all over the place, with no one opinion snagging widespread support. The Voynich manuscript continues to mystify medievalists and confuse cryptologists centuries after its supposed creation. It remains as impenetrable and inexplicable as ever. But is this truly one of the mysteries in the histories? A book on female maintenance? Maybe. Want to see the full episode? Sign up for the show notes and the link will be in next week's email.
Ransom Godwin at Mountain High Time is locked in a basement writing new episodes to keep your addiction to mysteries facilitated.
Signing up for the show notes, you get behind-the-scenes thoughts and points we sometimes can't relay over social media platforms. Brought to you by ITM Trading. ITM Trading has spent the last 28 plus years developing a team of expert researchers and gold and silver analysts to make this possible. Simply put, we build strategies which are historically proven to protect your wealth and assets through any economic downturn. 866-834-1422. That's 866-834-1422.
Thoughts to go across the dial. Contraband will be a thought in the future, and if you enjoy our types of conversations, just free speaking about a lot of things, trying to connect the dots and ideas, and hopefully you're with us on that conversation to fill in those pieces and make a wider tapestry with all the colors and all the figures in place so we can truly see what's coming at us. If you appreciate this type of info, revolution.radio, consider a donation. Keep the production cost, running cost. It's not free to have a radio station that's online all the time, 7 days a week, with different slots, different hosts plugged in. So consider a gift of the summertime, of the spring, to blossom the information flower out through the rest of the summer, because it does look like it's going to get dicey here. A lot of people are talking about very strange contagion coming in here in terms of something in May and June with the global economy. Now, it doesn't have to be a full, complete collapse, because I just don't, maybe correct me if I'm wrong here, but I don't think it's going to be this one day we just wake up and everything's gone to oblivion. I don't think it works that way. I think this is a milking of the wealth and a transference of wealth as much as they can for as long as they can. Frog in the boiling pot of water without boiling too hot. Because you got to have people with confidence to stay in the system. See, that's the whole thing about the confidence of the U.S. dollar being wiped out. They weaponized it. Now everybody's afraid of who's next. If I don't agree with the Americans, what are they going to do? They're going to take they're going to confiscate this or that. Are they going to hold our companies? Are they going to take our bank accounts? Are they going to confiscate our gold? So the trust and the faith in the U.S. dollar as a reserve currency is gone. Gone. It's one thing when countries don't trust our money. So that's in the business arena. That's in like countries paying countries. That's in exports and, sovereign debt, sovereign wealth funds, etc. That's there. That's not on Main Street. Now, if Main Street loses the faith in the U.S. dollar and the global community loses the faith in the U.S. dollar at the same time, that's when it collapses. But word on the street is don't trust the U.S. dollar anymore. But down on Main Street, it's like things appear to be plugging along and chugging along as normal. So I don't think they're really just going to rip the rug out from under you until the rest of the planet doesn't accept it, and then it becomes the major news story across so many Financial Times and financial news pages that they can't even hide it from the American people. At that point, I think they will pull it. But for right now, they're just going to try to milk you like a cow getting weaker by the day. They're going to keep trying to milk the wealth from one portion of our Earth to the next. Because you got to look at it like this. All these weather changes we're seeing brought on by electromagnetic changes across not only our solar system, but the spiral arm of our galaxy. It goes way far past our little Earth here. The repercussions we're seeing are more electrified skies, ground to sky lightning. There's discharge over the capacitor is overcharged. It's got to release the charge. All right, so our sun's stepping down, going to be heading into lower activity here right as we come off the solar cycle. Predicted it was going to happen last solar cycle, but it's still much lower. If you go back and look even from 100 years ago, we're still at extremely low solar activity values compared to average solar cycles through the last 150 years. So this is looking at a fire sale, or if you're going to look at all your assets on the books, and some are going to be absolutely non-performing assets in the future. You already know that. It's already written off. But you consider these Five Eyes nations, or those, they're already written off. The fire sale is on, and they're just milking the wealth out because that debt cycle can be restarted in North Africa and Sahel with these new grow zones, emerging weather patterns that will allow stable crop production, and from that, stable society. And we can build for another 80 years on the fourth turning. Right over there in Middle East, North Africa, And here's Ransom talking about this walled city going over there. Like wherever you look, the fingerprint of debt moving over to a new place on the planet to restart the system is fully in play. Like it's black and white for all to see. But if the money's moving from one place to another place, that movement's going to continue. They're not just going to stop, but there's still a lot of wealth here that can be extracted. A lot. And they're not just going to burn it all when they could still extract. So I'm just wondering at what point that is, because I was back to this Martin Armstrong article that I started way back in the first hour where they kind of got off track with that. But again, the United States and Europe and Japan, so those three areas on the world are all in the same boat. Like they just keep printing. They're never going to service the debt. They have to default somehow because it's just literally financially and physically and numerically impossible to even pay the interest on all of this debt that's issued. And each minute we go by, in each day and each week, it's another billion every 3 months now for America. Or I'm sorry, trillion. Whew, missing my numbers. Another trillion per every 3 months. Every quarter, they're printing another trillion. So at the end of the year, we'll add another 3+ trillion. Even just the interest on that. And the European Union is doing the same thing. Like there's just all this massive money supply just coming out of thin air. And eventually, it's going to start to get into the hyperinflation. But before that, before the citizens turn on the politicians and absolutely point the gun and go through the neighborhoods and turn them into flaming, firestorms, they're absolutely going to start a war somewhere. They're not going to let the American people get the upper hand to make it so bad here that everybody can just easily look and know who's creating the problem, and then they're going to go take action against the problem to solve that problem. It's never really going to get to that point, I don't think. They're going to start a massive global war, and then we can default on the debt. The U.S. can default, Europe can default on the debt, and Japan can default on the debt. And then we'll get into this stagflation economy where the economy is really doing nothing outside the war machine, and the only things making money are going to be involved in war only. And then you're going to get into this extreme inflation. Now, will it go to hyperinflation like Weimar Germany? Not sure. But extreme inflation. So that's kind of the way that it looks going out through into 2025. So my question to you, Ransom, would be, at what point do you think this trigger, to bring us into the war? It's good. We're going to go into a dark age when this happens, by the way. So I'm saying having extra books or things on hard drives or whatnot. But what do you think is going to be the catalyst to get us into the war, and how far down the rabbit hole do we need to go of money swimming in debt before, I don't know, it's just the whole system, they finished see, that's the whole misnomer. The system's not going to break until they want it to break. That's the whole thing. It's not going to break organically. So it's like, how much longer do you think they're going to keep the charade going on and milking all the wealth before they purposely collapse the system? That's more the question. And welcome back to the second hour.
I think the milking of the system is the formula for the collapse. It's so incremental that everybody's sidetracked with everything, and they just don't really see it happening. But you do bring up a good point. How fast would it happen if we got hyperinflation? And I was just looking at that, and I put that into the chat there. Hyperinflation affected Germany. Paper marked the currency of the Weimar Republic between 1921 and 1923. So that's only 2 years. It crashed. Boom, it's gone. How quick would that happen to us? I don't know. And the question is at what time period? We kind of have to follow their plans. And I don't think a lot of their plans are complete yet. So I think it's still off within a decade. But when you think about how much change happens in a decade, the entire World War II happened during a decade. Lots of big events throughout history happened relatively fast, only within a couple of years. So it's the setup that's the incremental destruction of the currencies and things like that, and also the way to get people, cattle-like mentality to go with the mob to get anything. And I mean, we live that reality now, and I'm not talking about older people per se, or people that have their stuff together. And we were talking a lot that boomers get blamed for a lot. And it is true that they did do a lot, but there's a big portion of those boomers that continue the traditions of their families. They continued working just like they did. They continued keeping the tools and the trades and the knowledge, and they even prided themselves on that. So that's still going on today. Uh-oh, I think we lost a call. Let me find out if we're all still
Oh
here.
no, we're still here. I sent you I
Okay.
sent you a hyperinflation for the bread thing there.
Oh, okay. Yeah, so I don't think that all the boomers are to blame. Actually, in the end, right now, the boomers are the ones that are really the ones most capable of helping the next couple generations fix what they've destroyed, basically. And if that doesn't happen, then all of these other plans are going to, unfurl very slowly over the next decade. OpenAI considers allowing users to create AI generated pornography, just another thing to keep a large swath of the population occupied, mainly young men who are the workforce, the backbone, and mostly would be the military age people that would be any firewall against tyranny and keep them completely distracted. And then you have this article from Interesting Engineering. Lifelike robot invasion inside China's insane humanoid factory. Robots specializing in crafting realistic humanoids designed for interaction with people. And this is the key part, fulfilling public service duties. So what does that mean? Well, it means there's going to be a robot at the DMV. It means there's going to be a robot deciding what medical procedures the state is going to allow you to have. You wanted socialized medicine, you wanted universal health care. Well, they're going to bring it to you in a transhuman form, and this is how. And think about this too, as people are dying off, and and unfortunately, we are talking about the boomer generation. They are the ones that are going to go through the die-off phase first. And when they do that, not all of them are going to disappear, and they're going to need, support. So they're offering a whole new changeover of society where robotics are the ones that they're going to help you remember to take your medicine. They're going to keep you in line. They're going to report it to the government whenever you say bad stuff that they don't want the next generation hearing, or ideas they don't want heard. But not only that, they'll frame it as it's keeping you company. And like a life alert pendant, you've fallen and you can't get up. Well, that's okay because you have a robot living in your home. So this isn't just the plan in some futuristic, bizarre world that they've wrote in Hollywood. This is actual plans that they intend on using to utilize to phase the population into a smaller population. And more during that transition, you'll see the replacement of robotics and AI taking over all the functions of the human domain, but especially in management, in deciding things, because people are racist, they're flawed, and they have all of these other problems. And here's an article from Yahoo Finance: technology crushing human creativity. Apple's new iPod has struck a nerve online, and the reason for that is because these AI programs are now competing with human artistic creation. And although they can't come up with new ideas yet, they can make an amalgamation of all the human creations that's ever been created and form new and amazing things in that way. The problem is, are we going to really trust them with making decisions for us? Having a robot in the home may be one thing, but what if it's just an algorithm somewhere far off in a building, like this Google DeepMind unveils next generation of drug discoveries using their AI model? So not only are they going to be inventing the drugs, but they're going to be deciding who takes them, how they take them, why they take them, and all of this other stuff. So there is a mechanism to transition us to the next phase. And I think that there will be a answer to the emergency that they'll have whenever the currency does collapse. They'll have little emergency programs to keep people, fed. And right then is when the population gets used to taking the supposed hand up and replacing it with a forever handout in the form of a universal income and things like that. And it'll have to be digitized to be fair, right? Because we don't want the system getting out of control, and you don't want people making too much. So it's going to be heavily regulated. And watch if you don't see in the next couple of years, I'm guessing the IRS put forward ideas of how they're going to cross over to using AI to decide who gets audited and who is messing up. And all of the people that have been finding loopholes and stuff like that, you're not going to be able to do that anymore because the algorithm will pick it up because of the numbers, and they're going to account for all money out there. So they know at some place somewhere there's a think tank using algorithm right now to find out how much precious metals are out there, how many guns are out there, how many people out there are self-sufficient, and what's that's going to look like if they have to make a power move to take control. So it's a pretty bizarre setup that's going. So I think it's actually not something that you're just going to see as one single trigger, but a decade worth of triggers that happen. And if they go full out world war, that could be a period of only 5 or 10 years before they've completely redrawn the maps, installed new systems to protect the population supposedly, and enact their totalitarianism, which includes but not limited to removing all natural rights and inalienable rights from humans. Because those are arguments that are still being used to fight the tyrannies that are manifesting as world governance around the globe.
Yeah, that redrawing of the map can be done in quick fashion, and those that have the most freedom could be given over to regimes that would own them at the end of the conflict. Because you look at what happened with Austria and Czechoslovakia after World War II. Look at Hungary. Those nations were given over to Russia. It was like a coin toss whether Austria went over to Russia behind the Iron Curtain or whether it stayed with the West. And those nations were overseen by what was then the Soviet Union all the way until the 90s, until that wall collapsed. So from the 40s to the 90s, over 50 years, they had that totalitarian control over them. And now the world's perceived to be more free. So if we go into a world war again, and then the maps are redrawn, then this time, who's going to get stuck under whose conservatorship? Because I look at it as farming techniques or farming methods for the planet. So who would China have control over after this war? You look at it and see who would be left, and then who would be under whose control and what system of governance, or I should say farming method, would it be? Would it be the most staunch in what we consider free speech places now would be given over to the most draconian to completely wipe that out? And that would have to grow like a spring flower in another part of the world and go and emerge from its cocoon. And then 50 years later, they might be more outspoken and demanding rights again. Because the genie's kind of out of the bottle on this one, where the speed that they're moving, they just don't care anymore whether you see it or don't, because at the end plan of it, it's so much chaos and resetting that they just don't care if you know, because you'll be more worried about your daily needs and the needs of your family and community than you would looking at the BlackRock and Vanguard trying to corner all the existing single-family homes. And now that Congress is really probing into that, they've changed their business model to only renting neighborhoods. Like the entire neighborhood, they'll put 200 homes in, but all of it only for rent. Those homes will never be owned by a person. They'll be owned by these investment houses, and that's their new ploy. It's a rental neighborhood. And I've seen rental neighborhoods with tiny homes too. You go into, if you look at some, there's probably like 200 tiny homes. I mean, tiny homes. Like you see on TV, they try to glorify living in a tiny home. Well, I call that a tool shed. And they try to live in a tool shed. But squishing 200 tool sheds together with, and then saying it's a tiny home neighborhood doesn't make sense to me. So as this movement forward here in control of, if there's a collapse of the economy and the mortgages go bye-bye and all these banks get put under receivership and suddenly all these mortgages are called in or bundled, and then there's new terms for it, even though that contract is with the old banks. It's not with us, man. Your bank failed and we got a new bank, so you're going to pay us a new rate for your loan, and there's also going to be stipulations with it. And if some people will bail at that point, the only option left for them is renting. Guess what? There's all these rental neighborhoods popping up everywhere. And apparently they're between $2,500 and $3,100 per month, $3,100 a month to rent a house from this BlackRock/Vanguard groups of home builders now. So what are you going to do that? $3,100 a month? Really? That's a lot of money. That is seriously a lot of money. And they don't offer you a smaller home with like 1 or 2 bedrooms. They're always like these 3 or 4 bedroom houses. That's your only option. So what are you going to have? Families living together? Oh, wait, the rental stipulation is only 1 family can live there. You can't even have somebody stay overnight as a friend. And they're going to put all these stipulations in. So when you look at it, just how quickly can the world be restructured after a war, the map be redrawn? And as Martin talks about the introduction of all these central bank digital currencies, I was shocked to find that 103 nations already have a program ready to press the button to go live. More than 100 out of 200 nations, half the planet's central banks and nations are ready to go today. Then you start to look around and say, well, the people who are self-sufficient, they're going to be a problem because they also can think differently because they're already out there. So if they're going to chemicalize the water, the food source, or the rations or whatever given to the populace in the cities, that's not going to affect them out there because they're going to eat their own foods and it'll be a different supply chain. And they're going to think differently, behave differently than people in the cities that are under control. So again, we're going to have this split world, but then, in the split world, are we going to have all these split countries? Because my recollection is, and I've had this, I can't tell you why, and I can't shake the feeling. The FEMA zones map is going to be the new balkanized United States countries. And I've had this feeling ever since I saw the map, and I don't know why. It's just like my sixth sense. As soon as I saw it, I saw, oh, that's the way they're going to break up the United States. Because you look at the Soviet Union after it broke up, and then boom, all these countries reemerged out of nowhere, and Czechoslovakia broke into Slovakia and Czech Republic. And you started to look at these different, the whole, what you consider, that whole Slobodan Milosevic thing down there in the Balkans. I mean, that was all under one giant nation that absorbed, 8, 9 countries, and then they all broke off in independence from Serbia to Croatia and everywhere in between, Slovenia. So the world can be redrawn real quick, but then, have you noticed things get smaller each time it's redrawn? So we take a giant United States and break it into 11 areas. And those are going to be smaller areas. Now, will they be more easily controlled? Yeah, some will, but there's going to be a lot that are going to be a little more freestyle, I'm just curious how this world is going to be unfold in front of us and what's going to be offered to us. Now, see, they're going to drag most through the fear, kicking and screaming and like, no, the bank went down. Oh, no, the war started. Oh, there's And I saw and I'll say just one last thing here, the distraction thing. And there was one guy, he looked like he's in his early 30s, sitting in the car, and he's talking to these, kids today that are at the university. He's going, I understand, man, there's a lot of bad stuff going on the planet. And all of you organized so much to get everybody protesting and all the people together, hundreds of thousands of people in all these universities across America to talk about something happening overseas. You don't have any money here. You guys got no chance of getting a job. You're definitely never going to own a house. You barely have any money. And you organized all this to protest something that's going on overseas. And you all can't even, your eyes are that closed that you can't even see that you need to direct that energy and protest that stuff right here in America, where you got no opportunity. And somehow they baffled you and like bait switched you to protest something overseas. He's like, I don't get that. He's like, how come you can't even open your eyes and see the plight that you're in America, and I'll turn that energy? That was, a lot of swear words in that one. But anyway, I can't play it here on air. But I think a lot of people have seen it. But I just look at this going, what if they did redraw the map? How do you envision America or the world being redrawn? Canada, hell, that could break up into 6 countries too. The division could go one step smaller, because once they put those rulers in place over smaller nations, then you get a bunch of independent despots across the world, like New Zealand, for example. Not knocking on you, New Zealanders. I'm talking about your leaders, not you as the individuals in the country. Cool people, bad government. But that's just the perfect example. Everywhere you look, there's tiny countries like Liechtenstein. Do you think that? Yeah, right? I mean, come on. Everybody's installed to push the narratives or to push the agendas. The smaller the nation, the more the government has the control to do it, especially if the citizens have a way to resist removed from their possession. And I'll stop there before we get in trouble.
You mean like micromanaging your employees or your resources? No, because that is what it is, and they already have these plans written up. They're easily accessible on the internet. I mean, you could just look, read from their own websites about the plans they have for continuity, plans they have for segregating different sections of the U.S. into their own little governorships. And we're talking bigger places than the States because, you know, when you look over at Europe and elsewhere, you see little countries that are micromanaged. Well, we have big states like that. And they already kind of do it county by county. My question is like, after they do whatever they're going to do, what do they do with everyone? Because that's really the question there. What do they do with everyone that is hungry and needs land and wants things? What do they do to them? They have to be reduced in some way. So I have this weird idea almost of, you know, the northern latitudes, like you were talking about Canada. What if Canada, Europe, and Siberia basically just became oil fields in frozen tundra wastelands, and all of the people kind of lived more south because they had to move? We were just looking at a map of the tornadoes, and I'm sure you were tripping on that last night. Do you have a hole to jump in, you know, if a tornado comes your way? Because I don't have much hope for the civic engineering and planning when it comes to massive strife on a national scale. So if you had emergencies, enough of them in each little region, you always see the governor and the president, and they talk about FEMA, and there that intersects with what we're talking about. But they have these plans and resources to move in, but we've seen them do it. And when they do it, it's always a police action and not a rescue mission. So nobody's coming to help you. So what do the people do that just, you know, see that coming? We just have to do what the old school people did before the boomers, which was make everything, fix everything, grow everything, and cook everything. Everything, like from building your house to, you know, almost building your car, nearly. Most people back then knew a little bit of something, you know, a lot of something more like, and they knew a little bit of everything, that jack of all trades mentality. And that's something that is gone. And not only that, they're replacing supposedly countries that need workforces with people that have a low skill set because of experience or other reasons. They don't have a high skill set. But not only that, the people that live in the host countries have also been declining in the ability to have skill sets through their educational systems, transferring them over to protesters or rebellion people that feel like something is owed to them that they didn't earn, but it should be better because, you know, they were convinced by people that these old established ways of living were somehow bad and we needed to get rid of them. And now we're at that point where they're almost gone. So it's like a counter revolution must happen, anti-technocratic system. And, you know, you have a good portion of what people might call leftists that are good-hearted. They really want the earth to be healthy. They care for people and all this stuff. It's just they know so much stuff that isn't so that they can't see that, you know, they're fighting for the wrong people. So right now we have literally like you have bands that are called Rage Against the Machine that stand for everything that the corporate and government establishment stands for. So all of these examples of supposed counterculture are literally propaganda machines created by the establishment itself. And now we have a scientific attack on the whole spectrum of society, where they're using these Marxist agendas to set everyone against each other in the most basic tribalistic ways. And they do it from everything from voting to your ethnicity to where you live. We got to a point in the U.S. where just about no matter where you were, if you saw other Americans, it was an immediate friendly camaraderie and maybe even, a backup feeling. Hey, there's other Americans. You don't get that now, actually. You can with people that are cool, but for the most part, every time I travel, I see Americans are kind of nervous and scared when they're going through, and for a good reason. It's because people don't like us anymore, and now we don't even make things. That was the reason that a lot of people emulated and liked us in the past. I've been heavily into the Japanese culture my whole life. I always thought it was really cool over there. My grandpa fought in occupied Japan, and he brought home a lot of stuff that he liked about Japan. He really liked the Japanese people, even though he was sent there as an enemy. But if you look through their eras, they really liked our stuff more than they liked us per se. So like Nike and Coke and Pepsi and Levi's jeans and the whole dream was sold to them. But you have to be sleeping, as George, what's his name? George Carlin, excuse me, said, it's the dream because you have to be sleeping to believe it. And unfortunately, the majority of the population is under that Hollywood spell, that dream of maintaining some kind of wealth that they're going to get, some kind of popularity, instead of, some down home, wholesome ideas like building a family, growing a source of creation like food and maintaining it, or, working with their hands actually. And as, some people say, idle hands are the devil's work. Well, what are we going to do when everything is controlled by algorithms and most of the jobs are taken by robotics? Most of the mental jobs are done by, software and cyberspace. And a lot of the physical jobs now are no longer needing labor intensive work from humans. They have it automated. And it's even going further, where even the little things like maintenance and other things can now be fulfilled by other robotics. And people laugh and scoff at this idea. But if you're keeping track of it, you'll see how fast it's emerging, faster than anything. It's faster than the the industrial revolution. There are so many revolutions going on throughout time, which is another point. It's a constant state of revolution because it's a constant state of reset. But this is the big one, I think. And I'm marking 10 years. I'm going to say 2035, if you're still alive, you will not recognize civilization at all.
Well, that's a deep statement. I need one of those robots out on my farm. Can I borrow somebody's AI super robot? Because I need him to do a fair bit of heavy lifting and digging and pulling weeds and planting. And we need to dig a pond out for some ducks and stuff. So if I could borrow somebody's robot that could help me do all that task while I sleep or rest or something, that'd be cool.
Just call John Deere. They already have them available. What do you need? Fruit shaked out of the trees, ditches dug. I mean, they do the whole thing now. They don't even have to be there. They even have remote ones where some guy in an office can sit there and drive a joystick to do it. So if a guy remotely can do it with the joystick, isn't it safer to have the algorithm AI that doesn't sleep or get distracted do the work?
Only on Sundays with no overtime. Sheesh. They try to sell you that that's the kind of robot you need. It'll definitely work for you. Look, you can have somebody working 24 hours, 7 days a week. But I look at it saying, most of our farm equipment's broken 3, 4, 5, 10, 20 times already. So it would be the same exact thing, but instead of having auto repairs, you'd have robot built repairs. Because you got the bush hog down again, the mower, the float thing, the float pan and the carburetor was it was just flooding everything every time. We took it off a few times, tried to rebalance that float bowl, but man, every time we get up a hill, it just stalls when we're mowing. Like every time with as many problems as we've had with our machinery that really gets used, like bouncing around heavy field machinery, I can't imagine a robot that's very technical and very, fragile with so many different moving parts and XYZ axis, ball joints everywhere across the frame of the thing. I see this thing being broken more than it's going to be up and running, just from my own personal experience, especially if you were to have it out actually working on a farm or something. Sitting there for daycare, lifting granny out of the bed once or twice a day, That's going to be very different than having this thing trying to help you build a fence, plant something, move trees around, chainsaw some things. It's going to be a very different experience having a field working robot, like a literal, what you consider humanoid robot stepping out of some of these DARPA projects or Boston Dynamics, one of those kind of super robots. The iRobot is probably the closest example I can get to. Like a functional iRobot working on your farm or working somewhere. Those things are going to have to be so hardened that I really don't think they're up to the task of, they would be good for a while. So, you know, they always try to scare you that, oh, these robots are going to be the robot army. They're going to run around. They're going to run all up and down, and they're going to take over humanity, and they're going to be in every nook and cranny, and they can chase you up down vertical cliffs and everything. Yeah, for a minute. But I'm going to say they're going to be more broken than not. And if you were able to make one of those things and trip and fall off a cliff, I guarantee something's going to be dented enough that the appendages won't work right. It's going to be out of kilter on the XYZ axis. The thing probably will disconnect somewhere. There's going to be some rupture of computing power, and the fragile body, unless it's titanium, but those things would be so expensive using hardened carbon steel, titanium, or, you know, carbon fiber types of things for it. But the impact pressure of even one of those robots falling off a cliff, think about what our bodies endure of like joints getting separated and broken bones. Well, that's the whole thing too, is they're going to have dissociation of, you know, metals and joints also. Those things are, if I can relate it to my farm equipment, you know, they might be good for a minute, but they are absolutely going to be breaking down left, right, and center. So then where is it that you know, how many times have you had to repair your car? Has there been a recall on the car? Of course. How many times do people buy new cars all fancy, leather smelling, and then you got to get it recalled and go fix another, you know, 2 months later because something's wrong with the brake, something's wrong with the gas pedal, something's wrong with the ignition, something's always wrong in these new automobiles. So imagine if that's the newest one coming off the robotic line, for a better term. Like, how many robot recalls will there be? And at that point, you know, can somebody hijack the system and finally put a you know, something nefarious into their coding? Like we've seen every single movie that's always about robots. Somehow somebody's able to hack the system and make a malevolent robot where they start to do bad things. So I was going somewhere with the thought, but I kind of lost it, and with the robotics. But I don't know, man. I'm going to throw. I'm into some numbers. I'm into 333s, 3, 6, and 9 vibration frequencies. So Earth is 4.5 billion years old. I know. Bear with me. Some say it's older, 13 billion. I know. But we'll use 5 billion and I'll make everybody happy. We'll cut it down in the middle. Humanity's been producing carbon dioxide for 200 years. We've gone through ice ages, dinosaur extinctions, and somehow they believe that 99.99999% of all the Earth's physical climate changes occurred when humans were not on the planet. And I do want to come back with, you know, where you were asking, like, where or what are they going to do with the people? So this is kind of what you have robots some places, but India Power, they've increased and added 2,120 megawatts alone last year, coal burning. So some people are going to have more power. Some people are going to be in the chosen lands where this shift of economy is going to go to. You might call them BRICS nations. You might call them developing economies. But there's going to be a golden age in some of these countries where population will not decline as much. There's going to be areas where the economy is absolutely going to soar while we're having a Great Depression in some other countries. Like the firewalling off of nation states and the economies and not allowing that global spillover into certain areas of the globe is going to be absolutely why some of these walls are being built. The entire planet is not going to go into a global depression where nobody is prosperous and there's no economic activity anywhere, because if it went to that, even the globalists would lose. This is a reset. It's not total destruction. They're going to move the wealth from one area of the planet to another. So if you can guess with your crystal ball where you think a stable spot will be on the planet as we go through this transition. I mean, I might look for countries that started with a B or an R or an I or a C or an S, except the S is too crime-ridden right now, so maybe not. BRIC. Those are going to be the main points where not so much damage is going to go on. They're going to be the victors that rewrite the map. And I think they ultimately be the ones to decide what happens to everybody else on the planet. Whether that be cull, whether that be enslavement, whether that them, us becoming their robots and you know, worker class to, I don't know. Nothing's going to go to zero, I assure you of that. And if you look at the, what was that, the Deagle projects, there were quite a few nations that stayed stable with the population and actually increased their economies, where almost every single, unanimously, 100% of the Western nations declined 90% on the economies and 80% on the population. Predominantly Western nations, or you consider like France and England and Germany and the United States and New Zealand and Canada and Australia. These kind of places were absolutely horrific when you looked at just single numbers. Like, dude, how do you lose 70% of a population? But then you swing over into the BRICS nations, and all their economies were growing. And this is on the Deagle forecast from the 2025 forecast. Now, I haven't seen anything else after 2025. So if anybody else knows if there's a 2027 forecast or a 2030 forecast or 28 forecast, please let me know. I'd love to dive into it. But as far as I'm reading this, the breakup is going to be of these, what is now posh Western nations, resources extracted, and the flourishing economies will be other places outside that, and the world will restart again. Because you got to think, after World War II, that was a devastating war. I mean, that just swept the entire planet. But if you look in hindsight, I mean, there were many nations that were not even, look at all of South America, hardly anything. Look at the United States, didn't really get attacked except a few balloons here and there from Japan. Canada, unscathed. But you look at Europe, completely flattened. So there's always going to be these yin-yangs of destruction or peace, increasing economies or decreasing economies. The only thing I learned from history, if I can say one thing from history, is nothing ever goes to zero. And outside of a comet striking the planet that drops the temperatures 20 degrees Fahrenheit across the entire planet, nothing is going to go to zero. And there is a possibility to find a golden spot in a golden age on this planet. I got to keep it at a hopeful, you know, because this is what the media wants you to do, to sink down into this despair of quicksand, where you're creating this reality where there's no escape, because they're feeding you this reality that there's no escape. You're manifesting that. But know that that's only part of the puzzle. That's only part of the picture. As we have a dark side of the moon and the light side of the moon, we have day, we have night. It's the same thing. Part of the planet is going to go into a dark age, where the other planet is going to be in a golden age at the exact same time. And I'm wondering here in America, when it breaks up, which those nations, I believe the Southeast U.S. is a great place to be. I don't think Northeast U.S. is going to be great. You won't have enough heat. Infrastructure is going to be very limited and draconian, everything up there. We're down in the Southeast is a little more open. There's ports, you know, it's a little bit warmer, a lot more access to food, a lot more access to energy, like I say, ports. There's a huge amount of natural resources, mining, minerals. There's also cattle husbandry. There's a huge amount of, like, it's almost self-sufficient down here in the Southeast U.S. So anyway, I was rambling there, but I don't know, man. I lost my train of thought. I do that sometimes.
Well, as long as it doesn't turn like Appalachia, you know. No, I'm just kidding. They had their rough time. A lot of people forget that there's so much poverty there in an area you would think would be abundant with natural resources. Obviously, that's the only way that they've made it to today. I mean, after different things like coal and iron and different stuff stopped mining so much, those were different phases of the shutdown as well over time. And I think
that was on purpose, man. No, that this place has been. Now, if I might, can I dovetail for a second?
Yeah.
Just as they've kept Africa off of the world market for extraction of wealth, mineral resources through never-ending wars and never-ending despots and never-ending dictators to make that place into chaos so nobody could really efficiently do business there. I am absolutely saying the same thing. This place in Appalachian, all down through the mountains here, has been purposely kept poor on purpose for a reason. I don't know, but it's absolutely not organic that everybody has very little money that was living out here before the internet came. On
Right.
purpose.
Right. And they had good middle class living through there for a good portion of time. I did want to make a point about the robotics. You bring up a good point. I was watching a video the other day that showed, I don't know who made it, but it worked for like 70 something hours straight, and then it just collapsed. The legs broke and it just fell down like a tired human. It collapsed. And maybe that is the plan, that they sell all of this junk robotic stuff in a period of time to the Western world, with the idea that it's going to fail. I mean, you have to have noticed that the products over the last 30 years have decreased in durability and usefulness. And that may be the same thing. They're going to, cha-ching out some of that wealth by selling a bunch of products that don't last, and replacing systems that already work with systems that don't work using replacement. It may be like the green agenda, where you get ideas like solar panels, in areas that may have golf ball or larger size hail just destroy it in 1 year. Or, the wind turbines that you were talking about earlier that end up just getting, buried in mass graves, toxifying the planet. All of their programs are always backwards and don't work the way they're supposed to. The only problem that I see with that is that those aren't the same people that are running the robotics. And you were talking about cars. How long do they last? Well, I buy Honda, and almost never does it break down. I keep it maintenanced. It almost like I've had Hondas my whole life. I work on them. They're easy. With the small set of metric tools, you can take apart the whole car and put it back together. The parts move, they're adjustable, all of these things. So that's some good engineering, but I wouldn't want something that's post 2016, because they've integrated robotics and AI to the point that the common mechanic can't work on it because they don't know how to program. Some people do, and you'll have those people that'll still work on it. But like the Honda, guess who makes some of the best robots now? Well, it's the same company. So they have it in their control to make durable or non-durable products. It's the difference between Honda or the latest shift of automobile manufacturing that moved to Korea. Daewoo fall apart, if you know what I mean. There's different levels of what society is allowed to have. And, speaking of that, we seem to be moving into a time where they're finally letting out the ideas of, superconductivity or anti-gravitics. And, I saw a thing on the internet that was going around the other day. All of a sudden, people were freaking out because they had an article named, do you know what Tartaria was? So like on a mainstream site, they were bringing back up the old world that got remapped, so maybe it's not totally cinched up. And that's kind of why I say it's going to be incrementalism over the next decade, because there's a lot of problems with their plans and some of their systems don't quite work now. But if you imagine a robot now that's semi-durable and works kind of good, like maybe is over there in the DARPA hangars, and then you give that another 10 years of rollout to the public, and then you'll see that there won't be that many people, and they will fill the niche with these robots. The question is, are we going to have the phase of the fall apart stuff first? And that might be the plan, like you said. They do sell a lot of products that constantly have to be worked on, and anytime of you're using real, force, things break. So are you going to be one of the few people that can afford robot labor, or are you just not going to have land and you're not going to be able to go into the areas where the corporate commercial farming is taking place, which I might add is already using robotics for weeding, for gathering. A lot of this stuff, it's the throwaway parts. It's the throwaway system of stuff that's cheaper to just create a new one than it is to repair. So I kind of, to rebut what you said, all they need is a little bit of time, and these systems end up working. If you don't believe me, look in the automotive industry. Those machines don't fall apart that often, actually, and they do their job. However, like you were pointing out, they can be hacked. They can be sabotaged. And sometimes, man, I've been watching these videos coming out of China and other places that have heavily robotic factories. And man, you make the wrong move in that place and you're mincemeat. And then I watched one where a guy got caught up in a machine and like 3 other people got caught up in separate machines just trying to get over to help the guy, which means also people don't have a place on a robotic manufacturing floor just for safety reasons. You would almost have to replace them, with people, but people are cheap and there's a lot of them. So maybe they'll just, continue to trial and error their way to a good system, stepping on people like they have always in industry. I mean, take any industry and they did testing, or any military advances. I mean, if you go look at the amount of people that crashed just training to fly before World War II, you'd realize almost all of them crashed and died before they got people up in the air that could really, utilize the aircraft that they were making. So it's a unique future we're going into. And I do agree with you that it'll never be zero. There's always going to be these places that the elite have decided will do well. And you can see that taking hold right now, where the elite of the world have decided the Western world is they're going to get rid of it. The center of all of the old world creation, invention, architecture, and civilization. They want to get rid of that, and it does help with their Marxist agenda of getting rid of the old, telling you new stories about how things work, and giving you new passions to fight about, just like they do with the fake right-left paradigm, where they have people arguing about arguments that they decided what you should argue about. They're not debating the things that really matter. Just for example, like that fluoride argument, they had a lot of good arguments for and against, I guess, but none of them brought up the use of the fluoride as a mind control agent and what it can do to the body as far as negative health effects. It just wasn't there. So they leave major portions out of every debate out so that you could sit there, be distracted, naive about topics, and then incrementally in the background they get their way. And we've seen that as proof over the last 30 years. Like I said, you can just look at some of these programs like Agenda 2030, Agenda 2020, and then mark off all of the goals that they had and how close are they to getting there. They're pretty close, and all they need is a real reduction of the population and all of the outliers out there that might give them a revolutionary response or a counter revolutionary response to their technocratic world governance program. But I do agree with you. It's still a fight, and it's no place is going to be totally zero. So how do we navigate to get to that golden era from here is the question.
The treasure map. There's a treasure map. We just have to find it. Hey, you were speaking about, different electromagnetic fields, asking about those storms and thing. You knew eventually they had to come clean that we're getting into these electromagnetic changes that are also influencing the hemispheres of our brains and the way we perceive information. So this one comes off the expose. Life on Earth is under assault from human-caused electromagnetic fields. So they're coming clean now, saying, all right, the Earth is under assault from dirty electricity, which is affecting all forms of life. The pollution / electromagnetic field comes from satellites, the electric wires that span the sky, causing harm to cells and organisms. Okay, so what are they coming out? They're saying that we're creating the magnetic field, or now they're starting to trigger on about, hey, there's electromagnetic field changes, and if you start to feel them, and your body feels strange, and you're feeling strange, and you're perceiving reality differently and everything, it's because of a human-caused electromagnetic field. Don't even consider that it's natural that we're coming through and upgrading and changing energies on this planet, man. And that's the reason the reset's occurring, because new vibrational frequency, new frequency field means new means of control need to come in, because the old system doesn't work, because you can see through it so cleanly. Like, can you imagine our world today, like trying to exist under the church's rule in the 1450s? If they were to try to pull that again, everybody would absolutely be like, no, not even a chance, dude. Don't even start. It's that archaic of a system of overseership or control. It worked at that period. Yeah, it sure did. It doesn't work now and it never will again. That's the whole thing. These mechanisms of control work for the vibratory field that they're in place and started in during that frequency change. We're coming into another absolute change of frequency field again. So the way that the planet is ruled over or humans are controlled on this planet will need to shift during this time as well. Talking about electromagnetic field changes and density, changes from our sun, electrified fields coming here in October of this year. And now they're starting with these new articles coming out. Human-caused electromagnetic fields are now causing all kinds of catastrophes across the world. Reading into that, they're, like I say, predictive programming. So when you feel different, you see something different, you're just going to come back and go, oh, what's that story? There's there's a wire above my head. All these high-tension cables. Oh, this, oh, that. They already have explanations in place for your questions. Thanks for joining us tonight, David DuByne, right here. Ransom Godwin, also 420 TV. See you next week. Keep your mind open. If you have any ideas, give us an email or sign up for the newsletter. mostlycrops.org.
Thank you for listening to Revolution.